Robert Sullivan had always believed that midnight security shifts at the abandoned Riverside Mall suited his temperament perfectly. No crowds, no unexpected conversations, just him, his flashlight, and the echoing silence of empty storefronts. The 72-year-old veteran moved through the darkened corridors with the measured pace of someone who had learned to trust his instincts above all else. His worn leather boots making soft sounds against the polished floors that had once welcomed thousands of shoppers, but now served only as a monument to changing times. Tonight felt different, though, charged with an energy that made the fine hairs on his arms stand at attention. As he rounded the corner near what used to be Sears, his flashlight beam caught movement near the old fountain. A dark shape that shouldn't have been there. His military training kicked in immediately, every sense heightening as he approached cautiously.
Hey there, little guy.
What he found wasn't an intruder, but a large German shepherd lying motionless beside the dry fountain. Her black and tan coat matted with blood from what appeared to be multiple bite wounds. She was breathing, but barely, and when she opened her eyes to look at him, Robert saw something that stopped him cold. A recognition, an intelligence, and a pleading that spoke directly to the part of his soul that had never fully healed from losing his own military working dog, Kaiser, 15 years earlier in Iraq. The dog's breathing was shallow and labored, each rise and fall of her chest requiring visible effort that told Robert she wouldn't last much longer without help. Her wound suggested she had been in a serious fight, possibly with multiple attackers. But what struck him most was the way she looked at him. Not with fear or aggression, but with a kind of resigned trust that broke something open in his chest. Robert knelt beside her, his arthritic knees protesting against the cold marble floor, and gently placed his hand on her head. She didn't flinch away, but instead seemed to relax slightly, as if his touch had brought some small measure of comfort to her pain. He could see she was wearing a collar, though it was so covered in dirt and blood that he couldn't make out any identification. His phone showed no bars in this part of the mall, and his patrol car was parked 3 levels down in the basement garage. But Robert knew with absolute certainty that he couldn't leave her here to die alone. Making a decision that would cost him his job, but save his conscience, he carefully lifted the injured dog, surprised by how light she felt despite her size, and began the long walk to his car. She whimpered once when he first picked her up, then settled into his arms with the kind of trust that reminded him exactly why he had always preferred dogs to most people. The 24-hour veterinary emergency clinic was 15 miles away, and Robert had exactly $43 in his wallet. But as he looked down at the dog's peaceful expression against his chest, he knew he'd figure out the rest later.
What happened here?
Dr. Jennifer Martinez had seen enough emergency cases to recognize the look of a man who would move heaven and earth for an animal in need.
My dog's been hurt.
And Robert Sullivan definitely had that look as he burst through the clinic doors at 2:17 in the morning with a severely injured German shepherd in his arms. The dog's condition was critical: multiple deep lacerations, possible internal bleeding, and signs of severe dehydration. But what caught Dr. Martinez's attention, even more than the injuries, was the way the animal seemed to calm in Robert's presence. As they moved the dog to the examination room, Dr. Martinez noticed the small details that spoke to a deeper story. The dog's excellent physical condition despite her current injuries, the high-quality collar hidden beneath the blood and grime, and most tellingly, the way she responded to certain commands Robert unconsciously gave her in what sounded like German. When Robert explained how it found her, Dr. Martinez felt pieces of a puzzle beginning to align in her mind. She had recently received a missing dog report from the local police department about a retired military working dog named Bella, who had disappeared from her handler's backyard 3 days ago. The handler, a young veteran named Maria Santos, had been beside herself with worry, explaining that Bella had been trained to detect explosives and had served 2 tours overseas before being retired due to a service-related injury to her left rear leg. An injury that matched the surgical scar Dr. Martinez now noticed on the dog's leg as they prepared her for emergency surgery.
What's back for your dog?
She asked Robert to wait while she made a quick phone call. And when Maria Santos arrived 20 minutes later, still in her pajamas with tears streaming down her face, the reunion between dog and handler confirmed what Dr. Martinez had suspected all along. The moment Maria entered the recovery room, where Bella lay connected to IV lines and monitoring equipment, the injured dog's tail began a weak but determined wag that seemed to infuse new energy into her entire body.
Oh, good
Maria
boy.
knelt beside the examination table,
such a
her
good
hands
boy.
shaking as she gently stroked Bella's head, whispering words in both English
such a
and
good
Spanish
boy.
about how
Yes,
sorry she
you
was,
are.
how she'd searched everywhere, and how she'd never stopped believing they'd find each other again. Robert watched from the doorway, feeling like an intruder in this private moment of reunion. But when Maria looked up at him with eyes still bright with tears, he saw something that made his chest tighten
You're
with
saying the same
unexpected
thing.
emotion.
It feeds on
She
memory.
explained that Bella had
That's what the book
disappeared the
says.
night before
And it's getting
Maria's
stronger.
eviction hearing, when stress and financial pressure had pushed her to make the heartbreaking decision to rehome her beloved partner, because she could no longer afford both rent and Bella's specialized medical care for her service-related injuries. The irony wasn't lost on any of them that Bella had somehow found her way to Robert, another veteran who understood the sacred bond between soldier and military working dog, during what would have been her last night in their shared apartment. As Dr. Martinez worked to stabilize Bella's
okay, boy. She's
condition,
just checking you out.
Maria shared the story that would
Good
change
boy.
all their lives. 3 days ago, she'd made arrangements with what she thought was a reputable rescue organization to find Bella a good home. But when the people arrived to pick up the dog, something had felt wrong. Bella, who had never shown aggression toward humans in her entire service career, had refused to go with them, growling and backing away in a way that made Maria's instincts scream warnings she'd learned to trust during her own military service. Maria's story unfolded in the quiet recovery room like pieces of a complex puzzle finally clicking into place. She explained how the people claiming to be from the rescue organization had insisted on taking Bella immediately, despite Maria's growing discomfort with their aggressive demeanor and reluctance to provide proper documentation. When Bella had refused to leave with them, they'd claimed experience with difficult dogs and suggested they'd return the next day with proper equipment. But something in their tone had made Maria decide to pack up her apartment that very night and stay with a friend across town. The next morning, she'd returned to find her back gate forced open and Bella gone, along with her food bowls, favorite toys, and the specialized collar containing her service dog identification. Items that would make her valuable to people who might want to sell or exploit a trained military working dog. The police report Maria had filed the suspicious individuals as part of what officers suspected might be a dog fighting ring that specifically targeted highly trained animals. Knowing that dogs like Bella could be forced to fight or used to train other dogs for illegal combat. As Maria spoke, Robert felt a cold anger building in his chest. The same protective fury that had once driven him to excel as a military police officer. Bella's injuries now made terrible sense. The multiple bite wounds, the defensive pattern of the damage, the way she'd been found near the mall where abandoned buildings provided perfect cover for illegal activities. Dr. Martinez, who had volunteered with animal rescue organizations for years, recognized the signs immediately. and quietly called her contact at the local police department while Robert and Maria continued to piece together what had likely happened during Bella's 3 missing days. What they discovered next would transform Robert's routine security job into something far more meaningful than he could have imagined. Officer Patricia Walsh arrived at the clinic just as dawn was breaking, bringing with her both coffee for the exhausted group and information that made their blood run cold. The abandoned mall where Robert worked as a security guard had been under investigation for months as a suspected location for dog fighting operations. But authorities hadn't been able to gather enough evidence to obtain search warrants for the property. Bella's injuries, combined with Robert's discovery location and the circumstances of her disappearance, provided exactly the probable cause they needed to move forward with a comprehensive investigation. Officer Walsh explained that dog-fighting rings often used abandoned commercial properties for their operations, taking advantage of the isolation, multiple exit routes, and large spaces that could accommodate the illegal gatherings. The fact that Bella had been found near the old fountain in a section of the mall that connected to both the loading docks and the emergency exits suggested she might have escaped during transport or while being held in one of the empty storefronts. As a trained military working dog with highly developed protective instincts, Bella would have fought back against her captors, explaining both her injuries and her eventual escape. Robert realized that his nightly patrols had probably prevented him from discovering the operation earlier, as the criminals would have avoided the areas where they knew security made regular rounds. Officer Walsh requested that Robert continue his normal patrol schedule, but with a hidden radio and backup nearby, hoping that the dog-fighting operation might resume now that Bella was no longer there to provide evidence of their presence. Maria, despite her financial struggles, insisted on being part of any plan to shut down the operation. Her military training and deep love for Bella driving her to ensure that no other dogs would suffer what her partner had endured. The plan they developed over coffee and Dr. Martinez' homemade breakfast sandwiches was both simple and dangerous. Robert would continue his midnight security rounds, but with Officer Walsh and 2 other plainclothes officers positioned at strategic points around the mall's perimeter. Maria would remain at the clinic with Bella, who was stable but would need several days of recovery before being released. If the dog-fighting operation resumed, Robert's job would be to document what he observed and radio for backup. Not to intervene directly, instruction he accepted reluctantly, his protective instincts warring with the tactical wisdom of his military experience. Dr. Martinez volunteered to serve as their communication hub, her clinic providing a central location where they could coordinate without attracting attention to the mall itself. As they finalized their plans, Bella struggled to lift her head from her bed, her eyes seeking out Robert with an intensity that made everyone in the room pause. Maria noticed the connection immediately, explaining that military working dogs often formed strong bonds with multiple handlers during their service careers, and Bella seemed to have claimed Robert as part of her pack during their brief but crucial encounter. The recognition was mutual. Robert found himself stroking Bella's ears with the same gentle confidence had once used with Kaiser, feeling a sense of purpose and connection that had been missing from his life for longer than he cared to admit. When Officer Walsh suggested that Robert might consider applying to become Bella's official handler if Maria approved, the look of hope and relief that crossed the young veteran's face told them everything they needed to know about how much this partnership could mean to both of them. 2 nights later, Robert's radio crackled to life just after midnight with voices and the sound of vehicles in the mall's loading dock area. Following protocol, he positioned himself where he could observe without being detected. his military training allowing him to move silently through the familiar corridors while maintaining radio contact with Officer Walsh. What he saw through the loading dock windows made his stomach turn. At least 15 people gathered around a makeshift ring constructed from plywood and wire fencing, with 2 dogs already circling each other in obvious preparation for a fight. The crowd was placing bets and shouting encouragement, their faces illuminated by the harsh glare of portable floodlights that had been set up around the ring. Robert could see cages stacked along one wall, containing what appeared to be more dogs awaiting their turn in the ring. And his heart ached as he recognized the same breed characteristics and physical conditioning that marked many of them as likely stolen pets or rescued animals that had been twisted into instruments of entertainment and profit. He documented everything he could see through his radio, describing the vehicles in the parking area, the approximate number of participants, and the setup that suggested this was a regular, organized operation rather than a spontaneous gathering. When one of the dogs in the ring went down and didn't get back up, Robert had to fight every instinct in his body that screamed at him to intervene, knowing that revealing himself too early could jeopardize the entire investigation and allow the organizers to escape. The patience and discipline had learned during countless military operations served him, well as he continued to gather evidence. Even as his heart broke for the suffering animals, just 50 yards away from his position. Officer Walsh's voice in his earpiece confirmed that backup was in position and ready to move. But they needed to wait until they could catch the maximum number of participants to make the operation worthwhile. Robert continued his observation, noting license plate numbers and taking pictures with the long-range camera Officer Walsh had provided, when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. In one of the cages along the wall, barely visible in the harsh lighting, was a dog that looked remarkably similar to Bella. A German Shepherd with the same distinctive markings and proud bearing that marked her as likely military trained. As Robert watched, one of the organizers approached the cage, and the dog's reaction confirmed his worst fears. She backed away from the man with the specific body language that suggested she had been abused but retained the alertness and intelligence of professional training. Robert realized that this dog might be another stolen military working dog, possibly taken from a veteran who was going through the same hell that Maria had experienced when Bella disappeared. The operation suddenly became personal in a way that transcended his professional obligations, and he found himself thinking not just about justice for Bella, but about all the veterans and dogs who might still be suffering because of the criminals gathered in the loading dock below. When Officer Walsh gave the signal for the raid to begin, Robert felt a surge of satisfaction that reminded him exactly why he had chosen to serve his country in the first place. Sometimes the most important battles were fought not on foreign soil, but in the forgotten corners of American communities, where evil thought it could operate without consequences. The raid was swift and decisive, with Officer Walsh's team coordinating perfectly to block all exits while animal control officers secured the injured and traumatized dogs. Robert watched from his observation point as handcuffs were applied and rights were read, feeling a sense of completion that had been missing from his life for years. The German Shepherd had spotted in the cage turned out to be Dakota, a retired military working dog who had disappeared from her handler's yard in a neighboring county 2 weeks earlier. Her handler, Staff Sergeant Jennifer Kim, arrived at the emergency veterinary clinic where all the rescued dogs had been taken, and her reunion with Dakota was every bit as emotional as Marius had been with Bella. Dr. Martinez found herself coordinating care for 12 dogs of various breeds and conditions, with Robert volunteering to help however he could and Maria insisting on assisting despite her own financial challenges. The media attention that followed the raid brought donations from across the region, with veterans organizations and animal rescue groups stepping forward to ensure that all the dogs received proper medical care and rehabilitation. Most importantly for Robert, the events had given him something he hadn't realized been missing, a sense of purpose beyond simply getting through each day. When Maria officially asked him to become Bella's co-handler, explaining that her new job with a veterans service organization would require travel that wouldn't be fair to Bella, Robert felt pieces of his life falling into place in a way he had thought was no longer possible. The partnership arrangement meant that Robert would provide day-to-day care for Bella, while Maria maintained her legal ownership and would remain involved in major decisions about the dog's welfare. 6 months after that midnight discovery at the fountain, Robert and Bella had developed the kind of working relationship that reminded everyone who met them why the bond between soldier and military working dog was considered sacred by those who understood it. Bella had recovered completely from her physical injuries, but more importantly, she had helped Robert recover from emotional wounds had carried for much longer. His new job as a consultant for mall security companies, specifically focused on preventing animal cruelty operations, had given him a way to use his military police training in service of something larger than himself. Maria's job with the Veterans Service Organization had led to her developing a program that connected retired military working dogs with veterans who needed the companionship and sense of purpose that only these specially trained animals could provide. Dr. Martinez had expanded her practice to include a specialized program for treating retired military working dogs, funded in part by the donations that had poured in after news of the mall raids spread through social media and veterans networks. The convicted dog fighting ring organizers had received sentences that reflected both the seriousness of their crimes and the community outrage that had followed their arrest, with their convictions serving as a warning to others who might consider similar operations. Officer Walsh had been promoted to head a new task force focused specifically on animal cruelty crimes, with Robert and Bella serving as volunteer consultants who helped train other security personnel to recognize signs of illegal animal operations. The abandoned mall had been purchased by a developer who planned to convert it into a mixed-use space that would include offices for veterans service organizations, ensuring that the location where so much suffering had occurred would be transformed into a place of healing and support. On quiet evenings when Robert walked through his neighborhood with Bella at his side, he often reflected on the chain of events that had brought them together and changed both their lives so dramatically. The security job that had once been just a way to pay bills had become a calling that connected him with a community of people who understood that service didn't end when the uniform came off. Bella had not only recovered from her trauma, but had resumed her role as a working dog, this time focused on detecting signs of distress in other veterans who visited the community center, where Robert now volunteered 3 days a week. Her ability to sense panic attacks before they became severe had made her an invaluable part of the support system that helped other veterans navigate the challenges of civilian life. Maria had become not just Bella's co-parent but Robert's closest friend, their shared love for the remarkable dog creating a bond that had expanded to include their families and mutual support through the ongoing challenges that all veterans faced. The other dogs rescued from the fighting ring had all found homes with veterans or families connected to the military community, creating a network of support and understanding that stretched across the region. Dr. Martinez had documented their recoveries in a series of articles for veterinary journals, helping to raise awareness about the specific needs of retired military working dogs and the importance of connecting them with handlers who understood their training and temperament. The donations that continued to arrive at the clinic were now being used to provide free medical care for any retired military working dog whose handler was struggling financially, ensuring that cost would never again force someone to choose between keeping their partner and meeting basic needs. The most meaningful change for Robert, though, was the way his relationship with Bella had restored his sense of connection to something larger than himself. Her morning routine of checking every room in his small apartment reminded him of the security protocols that had once been second nature, but now felt like homemaking rather than threat assessment. Her insistence on walking the same route through their neighborhood each evening had introduced him to neighbors he'd lived near for years without really knowing, creating a social network that had grown organically around their shared appreciation for the remarkable dog who had survived so much yet retained her capacity for trust and joy. Bella's monthly visits to the VA hospital, where she provided comfort to veterans receiving treatment, had reconnected Robert with his own healthcare team in ways that made him more willing to address the ongoing effects of his military service. Her presence during his therapy sessions had helped him find words for experiences he had never been able to discuss before, and her calm acceptance of his nightmares had made them less frightening and more manageable. Most importantly, caring for Bella had given Robert a reason to plan for the future rather than simply endure the present. And her obvious contentment in their shared life had convinced him that healing was possible even after trauma that had once seemed insurmountable. The partnership that had begun with a desperate rescue at an abandoned fountain had evolved into a daily demonstration of loyalty, courage, and the power of second chances for both human and canine veterans who had given so much in service to others. Now, as Robert prepared for sleep each night with Bella settled comfortably on her bed beside his own, he often thought about the other veterans and dogs who might still be searching for the same connection they had found together. If you're listening to this story, perhaps you know someone who could benefit from the kind of partnership that saved both Robert and Bella from lives of quiet desperation and gave them purpose that honored their shared commitment to service. The program that Maria developed has expanded to serve veterans in 12 states now, and they're always looking for volunteers who understand that healing often comes in the form of 4 legs, a wagging tail, and eyes that see straight into the soul of someone who needs to be needed again. Consider sharing this story with others in your community who might be ready to open their hearts to the possibility that the best therapy sometimes comes with a collar and an unshakable belief that every veteran deserves someone who will never give up on them. Our next story will introduce you to another veteran whose life was transformed by an unexpected 4-legged guardian angel. And we hope you'll join us for that journey of healing, loyalty, and the unbreakable bonds that remind us all what it truly means to leave no one behind. To all the veterans and military families listening tonight, know that your service will never be forgotten, and your sacrifices continue to inspire communities across America to extend the same loyalty and commitment you showed to all of us.